If you had to guess what percentage of the global population is white, what would you guess? And if you've been hanging out in these spaces for a while, you might already know. But this was brand new information to me as of yesterday. Okay, I'll give you one more second. Would you have guessed 7%? 7%. What? I'm talking to another friend about this, and we're just pissed. We're like, why am I 40 plus years old and just learning of this? Like, yet another example of something so simple that could have been taught in school, and it just wasn't. It's just not, but still, that's not even the point of my video yet. I learned that fact from TikTok yesterday, as so many of us learn so many of our history facts, right? And I just threw it up in a story on Instagram, rather flippantly. I'm usually really committed to doing at least just a brief, quick fact check of stuff that I share, but I didn't do that with this. Just threw it up in a story quick. Asked people, yeah, whatever. So I was revisiting it today, and I thought, I probably should have at least done a quick search of that just to make sure that is, in fact, accurate. Which I did. So I went to look it up, and here's my point. It is, in fact, 7%. That's true. But it took me a minute to find it. I had to dig for it. Like, that should be something so easy to just do a quick... My hair. That should be something so easy to just do a quick Google search for, and boom, it just pop up, 7%. It's not. And that's very troubling to me because it's just yet another example of how much information is controlled and withheld. And if we're not looking for it, and if we're not tuned in, we would have no idea. It's fucking diabolical.
He says if we don't change this and change it rapidly, white people will lose their numerical majority in this country, and this will no longer be a white man's land. Now, I'm not misrepresenting this. I'm telling you almost exactly what he says. He says there are 3 things we can do to solve this. Number 1, we could pay women to have babies, as they have been doing in Western European nations for years. Then he says, and these are his words, not mine, unfortunately, we would have to pay women of all colors to have babies, so we don't want to do that. He says the second thing we could do is increase the number of legal immigrants that are allowed into this country every year. Then once again he says, unfortunately, the vast majority of those wanting to come to this country today are people of color, so we don't want to do that. The third thing he says, and women had better pay attention to this, 60% of the fetuses that are aborted every year are white. If we could keep that 60% alive, that would solve our birth dearth. Does that sound like racism to you?
Now, the U.S. Embassy in Pretoria has received a registration list of over 67,000 South Africans willing to relocate to the U.S. The South African Chamber of Commerce in the USA said the interest follows Washington's initiative to resettle members of the Afrikaner community. How significant is this? DW correspondent Thuso Kumalo provides some answers.
This is a significant development because the South African Chamber of Commerce in the USA says its website continues to be inundated with registrations from individuals seeking more details about the program to have them resettled in the US. The group said most applicants were between the ages of 25 and 45 and had 2 or 3 dependents.
I would like to take the refugee status in America. I want them to give us the chance to leave, because not everyone wants to stay. I know AfriForum said that, we're here to stay, but I don't think they speak for everyone. And personally, I don't want to stay here. I've got no family in terms of there's no potential for me to have a family in this country.
Since President Donald Trump returned to the White House, relations between the US and South Africa have deteriorated. Tensions between Pretoria and Washington intensified when South African President Cyril Ramaphosa signed the land expropriation law. Trump deems the law racist and in an executive order offered refugee status to Afrikaners and other white South Africans, describing the country as a dangerous place for them.
Yeah. South Africa in 1992. Yeah. Okay. Barely the vote. South Africa. Yeah. And I'm walking the street. I'm not a small person. I'm walking, and there are a couple coming towards me. They're South Africa. They're white. They did not even look up. They're just looking down, talking to each other. It was fully expected that I would part around them for them to keep walking forward. Yeah. It wasn't even, let's just both take a slight half step to the side as you pass one another. No, that is not what happened. Another time I'm in a convenience store and I put the money down and the gum or whatever I was buying. While I'm there in that little open section of the heavily overstuffed purchase area, someone comes up behind me, puts something down, fully expecting that they're going to be taken next when I am standing there. Like I said, I'm not a small person. This was South Africa. And I realized, okay, they still have a way to go because they haven't even graduated to the point of noticing me and then calling me names. They were still in a state where I did not exist and I was irrelevant.
Realize we old timers, we grew up. If you called someone Neanderthal, that was an insult. Do you realize that the most racist scientific community ever were 19th century anthropologists? They're the ones that set up the race and this, and white male humans were at the top of the evolutionary ladder, and blacks and everybody else were lower, still evolving, closer to the apes. So watch what happens. In the 1990s, now that we can do genetic tracking and things, the world found out that Europeans are between 1% and 3% Neanderthal, and Africans are 0% Neanderthal. So in the 1990s, research papers started coming out talking about how creative and imaginative the Neanderthals must have been and how they used tools. A complete facelift of the Neanderthal.
Talk about the people who mix with animals more. Like we need to.
Prior to the mid 20th century, the field of science did a lot of work to try to connect Black people to Neanderthals. They did all of these studies about Neanderthals. They said that their brains were tiny and that they didn't really have the ability to survive on their own. They used some of these justifications to say that Black people were not human and therefore not deserving of the things that human beings were deserving of. They justified it by saying that we were connected to Neanderthals until the mid 20th century, when scientists discovered that the only people who actually shared the DNA with Neanderthals were Europeans and some Asians. When that happened, they then decided that they would invest in a PR campaign that would make Neanderthals look like they were superhuman, because now they are connected to Neanderthals. So then it was about how effective Neanderthals were at survival. The theory is that Black men decided to leave Africa and explore other places on the planet. They got to Europe, and there's proof of this because the oldest human remains found in Europe belong to that of a Black man. What do you think they did when they got to Europe and found these Neanderthals? They mated with them. I know how out there this is, but I'm saying that there's enough evidence that there is something to this. They are the only ones who do not share 100% human DNA, and they have been the most vile and destructive additions to the human race. I feel like I say this all the time, but white people are the least evolved people on the planet. This is not my opinion. This is science-based. The oldest human remains that were found are about 200,000 years old. According to most research, white people did not come to exist until about 20 to 30,000 years ago. They are literally the least evolved species on this planet. And I genuinely believe that they have stopped or thwarted their evolution for the sake of greed. Everybody else has this like penchant for empathy and for being community minded and community connected. They do not. I believe that things like empathy and community connection, I think they're necessary for overall wellness and overall survival. But these are people who have limited their own ability to evolve because of their greed, and they're content with that. And they're willing to allow the world to be destroyed in order to maintain this lack of evolution. So when I say that whiteness is a cancer, that is what I mean. If you think about what cancer is, it is a mutated gene, a mutated cell that decides to prioritize itself over the wellness of the entire body. I don't believe this applies to every white person. I feel like I have to say that every single time. I don't believe that, because I think that we can individually choose to evolve, right? Even if you are not choosing to evolve as a culture, you can choose to evolve on an individual level. But in order to do that, empathy is a absolutely necessary component of evolution. But empathy is a threat to the system that white people thrive under, so most of them reject it. The reason why it feels that so much of the behavior of white supremacists is inhumane or unhuman is because it is.
Weakness of Western civilization is empathy. The empathy exploit. They're exploiting a bug in Western civilization, which is the empathy response.
Empathy and compassion are evolved states of being. They require the mental capacity to step past our most primal urges. Cruelty is seen by some as an adroit cudgel to gain power. Empathy and kindness are considered weak. Many important people look at the vulnerable only as rungs on a ladder to the top. I'm here to tell you that when someone's path through this world is marked with acts of cruelty, they have failed the first test of an advanced society. They never forged new mental pathways to overcome their own instinctual fears. And so, their thinking and problem solving will lack the imagination and creativity that the kindest people have in spades. Over my many years in politics and business, I have found one thing to be universally true. The kindest person in the room is often the smartest.
Of course, they'd have to put themselves at the top and now find all the similarities between white people and chimpanzees. And it start with the fully hairy bodies, the huge ears,
I have big ears.
And the person who wants, look at my ear here. How big is that?
Pretty small.
All right. Yeah. And people say, well, how about Obama? He's the first black president and he's got big ears. He's exactly half white.
Well, he's probably we
call him a black president.
Well, no, yeah, his dad comes from Africa. His
he's
mom
exactly
is totally white. He's exactly half white. Exactly.
Okay?
Yeah.
No doubt those big ears come from his mama. Okay? So the point is, I'm just saying, look how easy it is to be racist.
Right.
And take a look at a chimpanzee's lips. They're razor thin. All right? And we've got some very famous large-lipped black people, Jay-Z among them. All right? I don't have small lips. So they overlooked so much.
Yeah.
Okay? I got to add one just while you went there. So I'm going to add one.
Let's go.
Do you know lice outbreaks are 30 times more likely in white people than in black people?
Really?
The lice just don't enjoy black hair. Okay? For whatever reasons, it is 30 times more likely. Okay? Just if you put lice in the hair, it'll want to go to the white people's hair. You ever see chimpanzees pruning each other?
Oh, yeah, they pick the
They're
lice
picking out the lice. And
right.
apparently lice is tasty because they eat it. So this is a huge exercise. And anyhow, it goes on and on. The fact that you have likely never seen black children walk by a tree and say, I want to build a house in that tree and live there. Okay. This is like a suburban white kid thing. All right. And so that racist black anthropologist would say, these are just white people wanting to return to their roots in the trees. Okay. Look how easy it is.
I'm glad you got your hands up because I've seen you up close before. And you're
scary hairy.
You're the hairiest man I've ever been up close to.
I'm really hairy.
You're like you're like a heart gorilla almost.
I am so much a gorilla. I was once hit on by a gorilla. I met Coco the gorilla, the one who signs.
Oh,
and
Coco.
It was so wonderful. She's very sweet, and she basically signed to her trainer, going, "I'd like to take him in the back." And the trainer said this. He went, "If she takes you back there, I can't help you." No, let's go in the back now. I'd like to talk to you. No, Coco, no play now. But it was so weird to actually have a gorilla find you appealing.
Have you ever moved it? Do you wax it?
Yes, I've done it for several movies. And I once had I had a waxing for a movie, and they had two girls waxing me. And at one point they went, "Do you mind if we take a break?" You could basically make crop circles on my ass.
Okay. Chimpanzees 99.5% identical DNA does.
Yep.
What a difference that 1.5% makes. Imagine a life form, an alien even, I don't care, some life form that is 1% beyond us in DNA.
Where's that?
That we are beyond the chimp. The smartest of us would be brought forth by this species. This one is slightly smarter than all the other humans because he can do astrophysics calculations in his head. Like little Timmy over here who just came home from alien preschool. Their simplest thoughts would be inconceivable to the most brilliant human beings at only 1% difference.
Over the last 50,000 years, our species interbred with quite a few other human species, and one of those, the Neanderthals, they left us with some admixture that's now responsible for quite a few cases of Viking disease. This starts with a small growth, a nodule under the skin of your palm. As that happens, the fingers get pulled forward until eventually they get locked in place. Dupuytren's disease got the nickname Viking disease because in some regions in northern Europe, up to 30% of people over the age of 60 have this. And this is where the Neanderthals come into play because they were a species of human that really thrived in Europe and they weren't in Africa. Now, if you compare people that are living in Africa, whose ancestors were in Africa, this disease is much more rare. Knowing where these different ancient hominins were living, a team wanted to look into whether that could be why Viking disease is so much more common there than in Africa. To answer the question, the team looked at data from 3 biobanks. You can see how many samples they had there. And then when they looked at those genomes, they tried to identify things that led to a much higher chance of this disease. And they were able to identify 61 different genetic pieces of information. And of those 61, 2 of the 3 most serious were little genetic variants that came to our gene pool from Neanderthals when we interbred and hybridized with them. While they were able to look at different populations of Neanderthals and see which ones added more of this genetic material to our gene pool, they also looked at the Denisovan genome and they couldn't find anything that the Denisovans added to our gene pool that affected this disease. So Viking disease, just another way that these ancient hominins that lived alongside us and we hybridized with still affect us today. This one, it's a negative trait. There's also positive traits though. Denisovans, for example, there are populations of people that live up high in Tibet that have genetic sequences from Denisovans that help them breathe at that altitude. The Denisovans, they'd lived up there for hundreds of thousands of years, so they had time to fine-tune that adaptation through evolution. And then our species came along like the kid who gets to the group but doesn't do anything but gets the good grade. We interbred with them. That gene became a part of our gene pool, and now it still exists. It's helping us out.
If you make the assumption that the human race arose around the equator and that skin color, dark skin color would be the phenotype, then are you assuming that as people moved outward, there was a mutation, and if you were in the north, it allowed that mutation to live, which is how we got white people?
Yes.
Would that follow?
Yeah. If Nina Jablonski, who spoke at another one of your things, explained this, and she played a role in studying the reason for dark skin, which is if you have lots of intense sunlight, it destroys folic acid, and it turns out folic acid is really important for babies to develop properly, so it's not too good for a population for the babies to not develop properly. So that's why dark skin. Now, as you move north, there's another essential vitamin called vitamin D. There's an intermediate, biochemical intermediate, that needs to be then converted by the liver, but that intermediate's formed by UV light going through the skin. If you're near the equator and you have a dark skin, it still gets through enough to get your vitamin D. But now if you go north and it's cold and you wrap up and it's less sun because the sun's coming at an angle now, you will get rickets and have other problems supposedly. So that's thought to be the reason for selection for lighter skin.
All evidence shows that life began in Africa and later left Africa to go into Europe and cross Asia, the land bridge into North America and South America. But all began in Africa. You would expect the greatest genetic diversity of the human species to be expressed in Africa. So what do I mean by genetic diversity? Is it skin color? Because that's what everyone thinks about when they... No, forget skin color. Forget it. I'm talking about other features you can measure about people. So, if you have the greatest genetic diversity, where would you find the tallest person in the world? It'd be in Africa. You got the Watusi. Where would you find the shortest person in the world? It would be in Africa. You got the Pygmies. Where would you find the fastest person in the world? You find him in Africa. You're getting him off the west coast of Africa. Yeah. If you wanted to find the dumbest person in the world, however you want to measure it, it'd be in Africa.
So the most intelligent
person. The most intelligent person in the world would be in Africa. And in fact, there is a project called the Africa Einstein Project. And they're looking for the next Einstein in Africa because that's where you're going to find the smartest person.
If you do not understand white supremacy, what it is, and how it works, everything else that you do understand will confuse you. In all of these 9 areas of activity, economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. Anywhere on the planet, minute by minute, day by day, all of the time, all